On this Sunday night, the race between vaccines and variants.
The variants are going to win every time.
The spring surge of cases just as more vaccines arrive. The stabbing rampage at a library in BC leaves one woman dead. Halifax police launch an internal investigation after this attempted arrest is caught on tape. And Canada's apology to an all-black unit that served in the First World War.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Canada is preparing for a ramp-up of vaccine deliveries. 1.2 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech are arriving tonight. That's just the beginning of an accelerated vaccination campaign. Just a few weeks ago, delays from the pharmaceutical companies put Canada's inoculation drive on pause. But with cases rising in Canada, the need for a more rapid rollout is greater than ever. Travis Dunraj has our top story tonight.
Right across the country, it's a race between vaccines and variants. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, warned measures need to be stronger and sustained longer to control the spread of COVID-19 variants. Highly contagious variants significantly increase the threat of uncontrolled epidemic growth.
They spread a little easier, they cause more explosive outbreaks, and now there's actually growing data that demonstrates that, unfortunately, they cause more significant illness.
In Ontario, for a fourth straight day, new cases topped 2,000, and variants of concern account for about 60% of all new COVID-19 infections in the province. Ontario is moving 2 regions into its highest level of restrictions, but there is growing concern measures in those areas, including Hamilton, Toronto, and Peel, are not strong enough.
Now it's dangerous, plain dangerous, because these COVID variants are escalating at a time that I don't think the province, the political layers of the province really understand what they're dealing with.
Ontario is racing to get shots into arms with nearly 2 million doses already administered. Some hospitals in the province created standby lists for those under 70, but were quickly overwhelmed by people signing up. Many were taken down. In Manitoba, the province's nurses union says even those vaccinated need to take variants seriously.
This is not a ticket to take your mask off and go shopping. We still have to be incredibly vigilant.
Spas and gyms are already open in some areas of Quebec, including in Montreal. As Easter and Passover get underway, the province is easing restrictions to allow up to 250 people to gather in places of worship.
So people come in, they keep the safeguards, they pray, and then afterwards they leave by other doors. So their safety is there.
Modeling from the Quebec Institute of Public Health predicts variants will make up half of new COVID cases by April. And there is growing concern that could happen right across the country. As more vaccines touch down, experts agree this is not the time to let our collective guard down. Travis Danrash, Global News.
A memorial is growing outside a library in BC. It's where an unfathomable crime took place. A man with a knife stabbed 7 people at random. A woman in her 20s was killed. The suspect, 28-year-old Yannick Banda-Ogo, has been charged with murder. As Andrea Macpherson reports, he was known to police.
And we must put the names of the victims on the front page of every newspaper and not the name of the stabber.
Emotions run high as another bouquet is added to the growing memorial outside the plaza where 7 people were stabbed seemingly at random during a terrifying attack on Saturday afternoon. A woman in her 20s did not survive. Those who live in North Vancouver's Lynn Valley neighborhood say this could have happened to anyone.
We live literally right next door, so.
Yeah, but we have friends who work at the coffee shop.
What happened yesterday just really rocks you, and it really makes you realize what's important.
The chaos erupted during a book sale at a public library. That's when witnesses say the suspect began stabbing people inside the building before moving on to the street.
I heard the yelling, and as soon as everybody started running, I just went, everyone's running, I'm running.
There was another 25-year-old woman with multiple stab wounds in the face that we were helping with. Somebody else was already there. There's at least 6 victims that we can count within a 50-foot radius, so it was pretty traumatic.
I'm still kind of worried about it.
A suspect was taken down by officers nearby. He is known to police and had a criminal record, but the motive remains unclear.
We believe we know the who, the what, the where, and the when. It is our job now to determine the why.
Officers still haven't spoken to all of the victims who remain in hospital with varying injuries. The community's mayor admits it's hard to make sense of this tragedy.
This is going to impact our whole community, but there's no question that the family and loved ones of the victims are going to be the most deeply impacted, and so our heart and thoughts are with you.
This as community members do what they can to lean on one another at a distance during this difficult time.
But I just wanted to show my support, and I'm very sorry about it all.
Andrea Macpherson, Global News, Vancouver.
To a developing story in Ontario where police are investigating the kidnapping of a 23-year-old woman. Early this morning, police were called to a home in Brampton. They heard screams and found a man and woman inside a vehicle in the garage. But the man managed to drive away with the woman in the back seat. The vehicle was later found about 5 kilometers away. Police say the victim is Selena Auk. The suspect, 21-year-old Kwame Garwood, is wanted on multiple warrants, including first-degree murder. Police in Halifax have launched an internal investigation. It began after video surfaced that shows an officer pointing his firearm at a black man whose arms are raised above his head. It's what the officer says that is disturbing to the black community. Elizabeth McSheffrey has the latest and a warning: this video may be disturbing to some viewers.
This disturbing video has been viewed tens of thousands of times since it surfaced on Saturday. In it, a Halifax regional police officer can be seen aiming his weapon at a black man and allegedly making an audible threat against his life. On March 26th, officers responded to a weapons call on Wentworth Drive. They arrested 3 people, but police say a 4th suspect ran away.
I was gone. Gone!
In a statement, Police Chief Dan Kinsella says the officer captured on camera has been placed on administrative duties pending a full investigation, and the language he appeared to have used is unacceptable. We recognize that any such incident can be deeply damaging to police-community relations. But some members of the African Nova Scotian community, already distrustful of local police, are not impressed with the response.
We're investigating, we take this seriously, we value our relationship with the black community. It's just copy and paste from every single time.
Given the context that we're in, the fact that the chief of police is not responding on record until a video comes out is an evidence of a problem.
It's been 2 years since the Wortley report found black people in the Halifax area were 6 times more likely to be street-checked by police than white people, expanding a rift that has not yet been healed.
The work that we're trying to do in terms of building community trust for the police, who by and large do a really good job. There's always the possibility that something like this could hamper that, but that's why it has to be investigated. That's why we need to get all the details.
Nova Scotia's police watchdog, the Serious Incident Response Team, says it hasn't launched an investigation because it hasn't received a referral or complaint. And in order to investigate, it would need a statement from the man seen fleeing in the video. Elizabeth McSheffrey, Global News, Halifax.
There was a funeral in Montreal today for a 44-year-old woman who posted a video criticizing how hospital staff treated her before her death. The mother of 3 claimed she was injected with penicillin despite telling doctors and nurses she was allergic to the drug. As Mike Armstrong reports, Quebec's coroner is now investigating.
There were 2 emotions front and center at the funeral of Mireille Njumuo. Sadness at the loss of the 44-year-old immigrant from Cameroon, but also strong frustration at how she was lost.
We hope that all the investigations are going to go well and fast.
Njumuo went to this hospital in Longueuil, Quebec, March 1st. She had a problem with a hip, although she'd be diagnosed with lymphoma 9 days later. But it was how she was treated in between that has many demanding answers. Njumuo shot this video from her hospital bed and posted it to Facebook. In it, she claims the staff is killing her slowly. She says she told them she was allergic to penicillin, but that they gave it to her anyway. Njumuo also complains about being isolated. There are reports the hospital was nervous she had tuberculosis. In her video, she says she's being hidden and kept from her family. She begs to be moved to another hospital. That did happen 7 days after she was admitted, but she would die at the second hospital just 2 days later. Supporters have held protests outside the first hospital demanding answers. At the funeral, many were wearing Justice for Mireille t-shirts. The funds collected will go to support her children.
We did not expect something like this to happen now, so the family was really in shock.
Now, the Quebec coroner is investigating. The Regional Health Board says it's also looking at what happened, but the case does have many drawing parallels to another. Joyce Echaquan filmed herself in hospital last fall, just prior to her death. In Echaquan's video, hospital staff can be heard verbally abusing her.
Cette femme forte.
Well, the focus on this day was mourning, but that may change. Njomo's family says when this stage is over, they'll decide what comes next. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
In the U.S., the two recent mass shootings have renewed calls for lawmakers to pass stricter gun control laws. The suspects in both cases used weapons they had purchased legally. Democrats are hoping this is an opportunity to tighten background checks, but Republicans are vowing to protect the Second Amendment. Jennifer Johnson looks at the new battle lines being drawn.
Members of Congress visiting the sites of the Atlanta area spa mass shooting that left 8 people dead, 6 Asian American women, as Democrats make another push for stricter gun control laws.
These are now scars upon our country that join the other scars of these mass shootings and tragedies that we've seen.
Some Democrats believe they can get enough Republican votes to pass a bill expanding background checks. The accused gunman in Atlanta bought his weapon the day of the shootings after passing an instant background check with no waiting period.
Don't count us out. I think the politics have shifted dramatically since 2013, even since 2016, the last time that we had a vote on background checks.
The Biden administration is urging Congress to pass stricter laws to stop the epidemic of mass shootings that has infected the U.S. for decades. While most Republicans are gearing up for a fight, others believe there is room for compromise.
You're not going to get to 60 votes with legislation that requires when a father wants to sell his gun to his son to have to get a background check. I still think the best way to do this is focus on commercial sales.
Not on the table yet, the much tougher fight to ban assault weapons. The accused shooter who left 10 people dead at a Boulder grocery store bought his assault weapon the week before the rampage. Gun control activists fear what happened in Atlanta and Boulder is the new normal after gun sales skyrocketed in 2020, the busiest year on record.
We know about 50 million guns were sold in the last year, many of them to people who live in states that don't require a background check or training or permitting. And so I'm truly afraid.
A group of Senate Republicans will work over the next several weeks to draft a bill that has a chance of passing, encouraging any Republican to work with them. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Coming up, the mix and match strategy in the UK, why experts are closely watching this experiment. There's an urgency to speed up vaccinations, but doses are in short supply. So the world is watching an experiment taking place in the UK. Scientists there have launched a trial to see if it's safe to mix and match vaccines that require 2 shots. As Crystal Gumansing explains, it's been done successfully with other vaccines.
The eyes of the world are once again fixed on Britain. After being the first Western nation to start a mass COVID-19 vaccination campaign, it's now testing a mix and match strategy. 820 trial participants are involved. Some will get an AstraZeneca primer followed by a Pfizer-BioNTech boost. Others will have the opposite. Or they could get 2 doses of the same shot, the current standard practice. Dr. Alan Bernstein says the findings could change how the world responds to the pandemic.
We're getting really short of supplies now. There's just a limit to how many vials or chemicals one can make in the world to vaccinate the hundreds of millions of people that have already been vaccinated. And so as we need to make sure everybody on the planet is vaccinated. And that's going to require, I think, this flexibility of supply.
If the mix and match strategy addresses that, researchers say it would be a major step forward, but it could also lead to enhanced immunity. While all of the vaccines target the spike protein, they focus on different locations in that region. So mixing doses may possibly provide broader spectrum immunity.
This is not a crazy idea that's suddenly just come up because we're so desperate for vaccines for COVID. This is actually something that immunologically makes sense.
Vaccines for Ebola, TB, and malaria are already based on the mix and match concept. While widely used in other disease treatments, the UK study is the only one underway looking at COVID-19 vaccines, something that surprises this Sabin Vaccine Institute leader.
Like the rest of this response, we want this to be the best science-based response as possible, and it'd be important to know if A followed by B is as good as A followed by A, or vice versa.
I'm due to get my second shot, my boost, in 1 or 2 months, I hope. I hope the trial is done by the time it's time for me to get my boost, and I can have that option, or at least talk to my physician about which vaccine I should come in with.
Both Dr. Bernstein and Barrett say there are conversations about a similar trial starting in Canada. Results from the UK trial are expected this summer. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Still ahead, a deadly blast in Indonesia just as Holy Week begins. Just in case you were wondering, that ship in the Suez Canal, well, it's moved, but it's still stuck. The Ever Given did nudge a few degrees Saturday night, but that's about as far as it got. It's now on its 6th day blocking the vital trade route. About 14 tugboats are still trying to dislodge the ship, but they don't seem to be getting anywhere. Over 300 ships are waiting on either side of the canal to pass, causing a major disruption to the global shipping network. Myanmar's military isn't backing down from its crackdown on protests despite condemnation from around the world. There are reports soldiers shot mourners who gathered at a funeral for a student killed yesterday, the bloodiest day of the coup. At least 114 people died, including children. Protesters have returned to the streets, but there were no large-scale demonstrations. Indonesia is on edge tonight after a suicide bombing during a Palm Sunday church service. The blast happened just as Mass was ending on the first day of the Easter Holy Week. At least 20 people were hurt and taken to hospital. Police say the 2 suspected suicide bombers died. A security guard tried to stop them from entering the grounds on a motorbike. Indonesia's president condemned the attack as an act of terrorism. Up next, how one American city is addressing discriminatory housing policies. The Canadian government is planning to apologize to an all-black military unit that served in the First World War. The No. 2 Construction Battalion was formed in 1916. There were 600 men in the battalion. Half of them were from Nova Scotia. They had volunteered to go to battle, but were turned away because of the color of their skin. But they did build and maintain critical infrastructure for Canada's war efforts. In a virtual ceremony today, marking 104 years since their first deployment, the defense minister says the country owes them more than just gratitude.
We owe the members, their families, and their communities an apology for the racism and discrimination they endured before, during, and long after their service to Canada, the effects of which are still being felt a century after the war ended.
Correcting the wrongs of the past begins with acknowledging them. One city in the U.S. is going a step further. Evanston, Illinois has decided to pay reparations to black residents who faced decades of discriminatory housing policies. As Jackson Prosco reports, it's the beginning of a national movement in the U.S. by giving back the opportunities that were denied for so long.
In the Chicago suburb of Evanston, segregation was quite literally drawn on the map.
It was a fast migration, and Evanston whites were panicking. What do we do about the black population coming into Evanston?
As the city's black population grew in the early 1900s, Evanston began a racist practice called redlining, forcing black residents to live in certain neighborhoods and making sure those areas remained poor by discouraging investment. Delois Robinson's great-grandmother felt the effects.
The redlining affected her and her husband because they were trying to open a business in a well-established area of Evanston, but she was forced to just stay in one certain area to the point of she had to have the restaurant in her home.
Discriminatory housing policies were common in many American cities up until the late 1950s. All these decades later, Evanston is taking steps to atone. In an American first, the local city council approved reparations for those who were directly impacted by redlining and their descendants, offering grants of up to $25,000, which can be used for down payments, home improvements, or mortgage payments.
I'm just grateful and thankful that this is happening, that I'm here alive to see it happening. We get to benefit for the hardship that they went through.
Evanston may just be the beginning. Across the U.S., there's a national conversation about reparations for slavery, systemic racism, and overt discrimination. President Joe Biden has signaled an openness.
Well, he's supported a study of reparations, which I believe is what's being discussed, and studying the continuing impacts of slavery, which is being discussed.
It's complex because there's little agreement about what compensation should look like. Evanston's reparations have been criticized as little more than a housing program, not a true reckoning.
It could possibly be the sullying of the true reparations that the United States owes to us.
It is, however, a first step, an attempt to try and correct the wrongs of the past by acknowledging the painful legacy that still exists today. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is the Bay of Quinte in Belleville, Ontario. We want to see as many parts of this country, so please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching. Donna Friesen will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I'll see you next weekend. Have a great week.